I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Denise Amankwa, and I do quite a few things at the moment. So I work part-time as a research assistant at Queen Mary University with their linguistics department. And I'm also doing my PhD, just started at the University of Essex. But my main job is working as a speech and language advisor. I don't really like that term, but I'm working as an advisor on a project with Speech and Language UK. They used to be called ICANN. And the project that I was specifically brought on for is called the London EAL project. But what I'm talking to you today about is the findings from my master's dissertation, which was at the University of Essex. So it was called English on a Pedestal. And I'm hoping to share the findings, and hopefully we can have a chat about what the findings mean for those of you working in education. Okay, so I'll go on to my next slide. I always have issues moving to the next slide, so bear with me for just a second. I have, okay, there. That always happens to me, I'm not sure why. So I'd like to talk to you about the journey, so how I even arrived at the idea for my research. So as I said, I work at Speech and Language UK, and our project is called the London EAL project. So Speech and Language UK are a charity, and they deliver lots of training, and they develop programs for teachers to use in classrooms, but they don't have any data on how these programs benefit or may not benefit bilingual children. So that's what I was brought on to do, to kind of research that. So part of the project involves training teachers, and I noticed that a lot of the teachers who are mainly early years teachers, we have a kind of true or false question. And one of the questions is children that, the specific words are children that have English as a second language will have severe speech, language, and communication needs. And it's a true or a false. And lots of teachers say true. And I was like, what is going on here? As a linguist, I'm like, there is no research evidence that supports this claim. So why do some teachers think that? I imagine because you are involved in the EAL world, you don't think that, but just want to reiterate that that is not true. Bilingualism is a gift, it's a good thing. It doesn't cause any kind of language impairment. And then another half of the project involves chatting with parents. It's probably the part I like the most. And something I noticed is that a lot, when I asked the parents, what languages do you speak at home? A lot of the parents will tell me the languages that they speak to their partner, but they were choosing not to pass these languages down to their children. And in my experience, I noticed that this was very common with my people, lots of African people, and also some families from Singapore, some families from Hong Kong. So I just thought, potentially, this may be to do with the role that English plays in their home countries, because the parents were from countries where English is an official language because they are ex or former British colonies. So I just thought it would be interesting to look at this. And then I thought of my own experience. So I am British Ghanaian. Both of my parents were born in Ghana and then they came to the UK. Most of my friends have the exact same experience. All their parents were born in Nigeria and they came to the UK. And most of my friends, like me, cannot speak the language, although a lot of us do understand the language. So we're called receptive bilinguals. Some people don't understand at all. Some understand but can't speak. And very few of us are able to speak the language. So that's kind of the journey. So I thought, okay, I really want to investigate this because I am personally affected by it. And it's actually something that makes me very sad that I can't speak the language, but we'll talk about that later, I think. Great. So these are things that I just want to start the talk with. Okay, so again, because you are part of this community, I imagine that these are all kind of basic knowledge to you, but not everyone is aware of these things. So we know that lots of languages, lots of children learn many different languages, and they're completely fine. It's just in the UK, we have this kind of view that if children are bilingual, it's something different or new, but around the world, most children do learn different languages from a young age, and it's completely normal. But we know that there are some languages that are dying. So in my case, for example, with my friends, for our generation, the language is dead, which is really sad because we can't pass it on because we do not speak the language. And but we also know that there are lots of academic benefits to children being exposed to their language and cognitive benefits. So I was really interested, why would a parent not want their child to be connected to their culture? That's how I saw it. And why would they choose to not pass this language down? So I looked at lots of research. There was lots of stuff. There was lots of US-based stuff, lots of stuff in Canada, not very much in the UK. And the studies in the UK looking at what they call heritage language maintenance. So British-born children with parents from other countries. Yeah, that field is called heritage language maintenance. There was just nothing, absolutely nothing. There was a really big gap on African parents from Anglophone countries, so English-speaking countries. And the reason I wanted to look at that particular group and not maybe, I don't know, Francophone countries, so an African country like Congo, or Lusophone countries, maybe like Angola in Africa. The reason I didn't want to look at that is just because I thought the situation would be even more complicated. I thought there may be similar themes, but the situation may be even more complicated because there's another language in competition with their African language, if that makes sense. So a child from Congo, for example, their parent may speak French, but they will probably, or may also speak Lingala, and they may also speak English. So now there are 3 languages competing. And then, yeah, I just thought it becomes a bit more tricky. So I'm just going to stick to African parents from Anglophone countries. Okay. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the context of Africa and languages, but like I said, many African countries are ex-colonies of either England, some were colonized by Germany at some points, lots by France, Portugal, sorry, and that influenced the language, the official language, and lots of, or most of the countries that were colonized still have the European language as their official language today. It's caused lots of issues in education because children are learning in a language that, for many of them, their parents don't speak on the continent. And to me, it just sends a very clear message that the European language is extremely important, and the African language you can speak at home, which obviously sends a not so positive message about their native language. Okay, so you may be familiar with that already, but I just thought it was important to share the context that some of maybe your students may be coming from, or their parents, sorry, may be coming from. So this part you're probably not that interested in, but this was the process for recruiting parents and as well as the teachers. So I didn't want to just talk to parents to find out their reasons for passing their language down or not. I also wanted to speak with teachers to understand what they do in their classrooms, if they're encouraging the languages, if they ask about it at all. And according to the research, these the parents I wanted to speak to, so they're Black, so they're from the Black Asian minority ethnic cluster. They are considered hard to reach. I don't really like to think of them that way. I think it's actually on the researchers, it's part of the researcher's responsibility to ensure that my process, maybe if it's interviews, for example, is modeled in a way that benefits them. And I think that's something we should all do if we work with parents, and not to think these people are hard to reach. We have to think, what can I do to make the process easier for them to be engaged? Okay. So sorry, me and my animations. So I had a semi-structured interview, sometimes in person, sometimes online, sometimes at the setting, sometimes at home, sometimes in a park. And from all of my conversations, I analyzed the data, and these were some of the key findings. So basically what I was thinking, there is a very strong importance of English. So that was for the parents and the educators as well. An extremely low status was given to African languages. You can ask me more about this later if you want. And sadly, to me, a lot of the early years practitioners didn't even consider their children of African descent or their parents as EAL because they spoke English. So that meant they weren't having the conversations asking what's your home language. They weren't, when they had kind of translanguaging activities, the children of African descent from Anglophone countries were not called upon. That's really worrying because of the, I'll say, the educational experience that the parents have had. So as educators, you are key influencers in changing or in challenging or influencing, sorry, parents' language choices. So whether they decide to pass their language down, whether they think their language is important, educators are key influencers in parents' language attitudes. But if the educators don't even see the parents as bilingual, then there's just no kind of conversation happening. So that was very worrying to me. And another thing was hearing about the African parents' schooling experiences, which I would call quite traumatic. So because English is the official language, I'll talk about Ghana, for example, because that's where I'm from. On the picture on the right is a school in Ghana that actually my grandparents went to this school, but I just visited there on a trip not so long ago. And to me, it was just extremely traumatic. So children were beaten if they were spoken, if they were caught speaking a language that isn't English, or ridiculed, embarrassed, having to wear something around your neck. Lots of similar things that used to happen in Wales a while ago, but Wales have done great in reviving their language now. But it's in an attempt to be part of the global world. But of course, if you are a child that goes to a school where your language is covertly and overtly kind of, it's shown to you that this isn't valuable, this isn't important. English is a status marker. English is a language that will get you job opportunities. English means that you've been educated. Of course, you're going to hold negative language attitudes towards your native language and want to speak your European language, the European language, whatever that is for the African country. So if that child going to this Ghanaian school grows up and comes to the UK, like my parents, for example, and the first education phase that their child attends, which would be the early years, nursery or reception, if the teacher doesn't acknowledge, doesn't send kind of the right messages, then the cycle you basically get lots of Denises. You'll get lots of African children that do not speak their language, and then they turn 21 and they're like, oh, I wish I was able to speak the language. Or their parents say, oh, it's such a shame I didn't pass the language down onto you. But if early years educators are receiving kind of talks like this, I guess, then hopefully we can cut that cycle. Because it is very sad that although African countries are no longer a colony, this kind of, I call it a colonial language ideology, so the ideas that a European language is more important, they're still being reproduced. But we have the power to kind of intercept and to stop that, right, if we're sending the right messages. So I just kind of wanted to talk to you about invisibility, because this is something that was very apparent to me during my data collection. So this is I just kind of caught this in one of the settings, one of the nurseries that I worked with. And this is a setting where 63% of the children were Black African. And I was so excited. I love languages, so I was so excited that the nursery manager was buying lots of books in different languages. And then I looked down the list and I was like, that's really strange. There are no African languages. And this is a setting where they really wanted to bring in a Mandarin teacher, and they had a Turkish teacher, they had a Polish language teacher. So these are teachers that are kind of just teaching the children everyday phrases in these languages. But I just thought, what kind of message are we sending to the children if the majority's languages are ignored? That's quite sad to me. And I've actually pinched the next image from Teaching Times, and I realize I should have kind of referenced them, but this is from another school in the same area in London. And I looked, and all of the Black children are, it was from a language and culture day. And I just thought it was interesting, I can't make assumptions, but all of the children that were Black were holding, so I assumed that this child may be from a French-speaking country, so they're holding the French flag. This child could be from Ghana or Nigeria, so they're holding the England flag. And this child could be from a Portuguese African-speaking country, so they're holding the Portuguese flag. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a clear example of what I'm talking about. So I just wanted us to think about what kinds of messages we send to children when their language is made invisible, or if they're from a country that has 2 or more languages that are very prominent, and one of them is a European language, but we only invite or make space for the European language. What message are we sending to that child? Here are just kind of a few more examples. I love it. It's fantastic. This is from a setting in Tower Hamlets, where I actually don't know what script this is, which is really bad. I should know, but I thought it was that's such a powerful message to the parents to say, we welcome your language here. We'll go as far as translating different signs around the school to include your language. Another thing to do with translanguaging. So something I do want to say actually is translanguaging is absolutely fantastic, especially with writing, but a lot of African parents themselves cannot read their native language because of the schooling system, which obviously isn't our fault, but it just means that if you call on a British-born African child to participate in an activity like this one, they may not be able to because their parents probably or may not be able to write in the language. But that's to do with Africa's language policies, which I'm really hoping through my PhD will change. But I just have a small snippet from a paper by Oakley-Welpley. It's called English as an Additional Language, Decolonizing Provision and Practice. So out of my remit, it's not early years, it's more year 10 stuff. But I thought the article kind of showed the need for us to really critically reflect on our ideas of inclusion and mainstreaming, which can often be put forward uncritically in relation to provision for EAL students. And we may think it's okay to have a one-size-fits-all approach, but we really can't ignore the deep historical, social, political contexts that underpin our EAL students' experiences at different levels of education. So just the fact that 2 children are even Ghanaian, for example, I have no clue what the next town, what the language of the next tribe is. I don't, as in, well, I know what it is, but I don't understand a word they say. And someone from the north of Ghana, culturally, I'm probably very different to them. I'm probably more like a Catholic Irish person. We probably do similar things. So just having an open mind, asking questions is great, and not assuming as well. Okay, so I've talked a lot, but what does this actually mean? Okay, so I think we really need kind of a real drive. Hopefully I can do more of these kinds of talks with early years practitioners just to highlight the difference, because I honestly think colonization means that their language backgrounds or histories, it's very different, and it needs to be considered when we're planning for African children's languages or African families' languages. It would be great if there were more books in African languages, but because of the problem that I've highlighted, where in Africa, I would say that their languages are not promoted or celebrated, it means that there's not a high number of books being produced in the languages because people don't see the value in their language, especially high quality texts, which for me is a really big thing. If I'm giving a child a book, I want it to be exciting and fun. And yeah, so I would really love to do more training on this. I have not developed any training at all, but I think it's a thing that needs to happen. And it's really important that educators in general are aware of colonial language ideologies and hopefully try to intercept and stop the cycle, because it is really sad to get older and think, oh, I can't speak my family language. And because African languages are tonal languages, this is another theory that maybe I'll do after my PhD, I think it becomes extremely difficult to be fluent in the language if you're learning it later, especially, sorry if you're not a linguist and I'm kind of going off on a rant, but if it's a nasalized tonal language, it is so hard to say the word correctly. So I will just give you an example. So if you say papa, that has 2 high tones, that means good. If you say papa, which is a high and a low tone, that means dad. And if you say papa with 2 low tones, that sounded high. Sorry, I'm not fluent. That means fan. So you can imagine how difficult it is if you are not practicing the language, because as a British-born African child, and then you become 21 and someone says, you should speak your language. Like, I actually should have been practicing this when I was 3, not at 21. It's very difficult, but it becomes natural if children are practicing from a young age. Okay, so I have a dream where every child's language and culture will be embraced, especially the actual indigenous language and culture. That's really my dream. I'd love to keep doing more of these talks. I'd love to help teachers. I'd love to get more books printed. I'd love to probably write a book one day. But to help me with my dream, I need people like you. So it's really important for you to check the languages at home. So if there is an African child or family in your classroom, please do ask them, because lots of the parents, some of the Ghanaian parents actually will be like, yeah, we just speak English at home. I'm like, are you sure? Is that the only one? And then after the 4th ask, they'll eventually tell me, oh, we speak Tree, or we speak Ga, or we speak Hausa, or something. I'm like, oh, you should have told me that. It's a good thing. But because of their experience, as I said before, they don't think it's a good thing to share. And yeah, there are lots of songs and rhymes. So there are some Ghanaian songs and rhymes that I've learned that aren't, they're not even in my language, but because it's a song, it kind of sticks. So that's something you could do. But that's more early years. If you're not early years, you might think we're not doing that in year 10. I'm not sure, but it'd be good to listen to. So those are kind of my main points. This is just a message that I usually show to early years practitioners about children's brains, and I encourage them to share it with parents of our toddlers. So that's on Speech and Language UK's website. And here are some resources that I was able to find that have books in African languages, or kind of focusing on African culture, which I think is great and important. But like I said, I do have quite a high standard, which sounds really bad. But some of them, do you know what? People are just trying the best and trying to do the best that they can. So that most of them are ebooks, I believe. I'm not a fan of ebooks. I like printed things, but at least there's something out there, and hopefully I can also contribute to this. So I do have a QR code because I'm trying to work on my presentation skills. So if you've got any feedback for me, please do scan the QR code and just let me know what you think, or what I could improve on, or how this talk could be better. Or if you're interested in getting in contact with me, please do email me. I love to speak to people that are interested. But yes, that is it from me. I'm really happy that you were all able to attend.